quiet Suffolk town, the streets dimly lit by street lamps, and a 17-year-old girl enjoying a night out with her friends. Her name was Victoria Hall, and what should have been an ordinary evening would turn into a nightmare that haunted her family and community for decades. Victoria was last seen leaving a nightclub in Felixstowe, laughing with her friend, unaware that danger lurked nearby. She said her goodbyes, walking alone into the empty streets, the cool September air brushing against her face. Just minutes later, she vanished without a trace, leaving a void filled with fear and unanswered questions. The panic was immediate. Family members searched desperately, calling neighbors, retracing her steps, and pleading for anyone with information to come forward. Police launched an investigation, canvassing the area, examining CCTV, and following every lead, but nothing pointed to a suspect. The town was gripped with a sense of unease, a quiet terror that no one could explain. How could a young girl disappear so completely, leaving only fear in her wake? 5 days later, the unimaginable happened. Victoria's body was discovered in a ditch in Creting St. Peter, miles from where she had last been seen. She had been taken far from her home, her life stolen in a senseless act of violence that shook the community to its core. The investigation stalled, leaving questions unanswered and hope fading with each passing year. If you're fascinated by cold cases and true crime mysteries like this, subscribe to Britain's Dark Files and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what comes next. In this story, we'll uncover how a decades-old case, long considered unsolvable, would eventually reveal the shocking confession of one of Britain's most notorious killers. Stay with us, because the truth behind Victoria Hall's disappearance is darker than anyone imagined. The investigation into Victoria Hall's disappearance quickly became one of the most urgent and high-profile cases in Suffolk. Police scoured every street, every alley, hoping to find a clue that could lead them to her. Witnesses were interviewed, searches were carried out across towns and countryside, and media appeals went out to the public. But despite their efforts, the trail grew colder with each passing day. 5 days later, the discovery of Victoria's body in a remote ditch miles from her home left the community stunned and devastated. The brutal nature of the crime, the distance her body had been moved, and the complete lack of evidence left investigators puzzled. The case was frustrating, heartbreaking, and shrouded in mystery. Leads dried up, suspects came and went, and for years the investigation yielded nothing. Every dead end added to the grief of Victoria's family, who lived with a nightmare that never seemed to end. The town whispered about what might have happened, parents grew fearful for their own children, and the case slowly slipped into the realm of cold cases, unsolved, unanswered, and haunting. For decades, Victoria's murder remained a painful shadow over Suffolk, a constant reminder that someone capable of unimaginable cruelty had walked among them. Yet even in the silence of these years, the truth never disappeared. Advances in forensic science, renewed investigation, and the meticulous work of determined detectives would eventually bring the case back into the light. Patterns overlooked in the past would become crucial, and a connection to one of Britain's most notorious criminals would finally emerge. Years passed, and the shadow of Victoria Hall's murder loomed quietly over Suffolk, but the true horror was yet to be fully understood. In 2006, a chilling series of murders would shock Ipswich and the nation. 5 women, all working as sex workers, were killed in quick succession, and the brutality of the crime stunned investigators and the public alike. The killer struck without warning, leaving communities terrified and police scrambling to make sense of a pattern that seemed almost unimaginable. It was during the investigation of these later murders that the name Steve Wright emerged, a man whose dark presence had already been hiding in plain sight. Known later as the Suffolk Strangler, Wright's crimes revealed a methodical and cold-blooded killer. He targeted vulnerable women, striking in the dead of night, and his ability to avoid capture for so long only deepened the fear surrounding him. Details of his crimes, how he would abduct, strangle, and dispose of bodies in secluded areas, bore a grim similarity to the disappearance and murder of Victoria Hall years earlier. Detectives began to wonder, could Victoria's death, once considered a tragic but isolated crime, actually be connected to this man? Her disappearance and murder shared eerie parallels with Wright's later killings. Both involved a young woman taken without warning, her body found in a remote location, far from any witnesses. The realization was chilling. Victoria Hall may not have been an isolated victim, but part of a dark pattern that spanned years. As the investigation deepened, evidence slowly began to surface, linking Wright to crimes that had long gone unsolved. And while the community had feared his presence, they had no idea how close they had come to understanding the full extent of his crimes. The Suffolk Strangler's reach was wider than anyone had imagined, and the truth about Victoria Hall's murder was about to come to light in a way no one saw coming. Decades after Victoria Hall vanished, her case had grown cold, a painful memory for her family and a haunting mystery for Suffolk. But in 2019, detectives reopened her case under the name Operation Avon, determined to uncover the truth that had eluded them for 20 years. Modern forensic techniques, witness re-interviews, and meticulous examination of old evidence breathed new life into the investigation. For the first time, it seemed possible that Victoria's killer could finally be brought to justice. Investigators began to piece together the fragments of information left behind, examining movements, timelines, and the patterns that had once been overlooked. A connection to Steve Wright, the Suffolk Strangler, became increasingly clear. The similarities were too striking to ignore. Both Victoria and Wright's later victims had been abducted from public places, killed, and left in isolated rural areas. Slowly, the case began to point toward a chilling realization. Victoria Hall's murder was not an isolated tragedy, but part of the dark shadow of a serial killer who had eluded authorities for years. The breakthrough came as detectives followed new leads and cross-referenced evidence from Wright's known crimes. In 2021, Steve Wright was finally arrested in connection to Victoria's murder, decades after the crime that had tormented her family. The arrest was a moment of relief and shock, a long-awaited step toward justice. Legal proceedings carefully built the case, linking Wright to Victoria's death through painstaking detective work. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, and every detail mattered in constructing the story of how a young girl's life was taken so cruelly. The Suffolk Strangler, who had never admitted his crimes, now faced the consequences of a life steeped in darkness. And while his arrest brought hope, the story was far from over. The confession that would finally reveal the full truth was yet to come, a shocking moment that would send ripples through Suffolk and beyond. Finally, in February 2026, the Suffolk Strangler's reign of terror came to a definitive end. Steve Wright, who had never before admitted to any of his crimes, pleaded guilty to the kidnapping and murder of Victoria Hall and to the attempted abduction of another woman the night before her death. For Victoria's family, the moment was both devastating and relieving. After more than 25 years of unanswered questions and unimaginable grief, the truth had finally been revealed. Her name would no longer be lost to time, and the darkness surrounding her disappearance was brought into the light. The court heard the chilling details of Wright's actions, the cold calculation, and the terror he inflicted on young women. The confession confirmed what investigators had long suspected. Victoria was the first of many victims, and her murder had set a pattern that would later claim additional lives. The whole life sentence Wright already served for the 2006 murders now included Victoria Hall, cementing him as one of Britain's most notorious serial killers. Though justice had been delayed, it had finally arrived, a testament to the perseverance of law enforcement and the enduring hope of a grieving family. Victoria's story stands as a haunting reminder of vulnerability, the persistence of evil, and the resilience of those who refuse to forget. While the Suffolk Strangler may have caused irreparable harm, the closure brought by his confession allows a measure of peace, and a reminder that even decades-old cases can be solved with determination, science, and unwavering commitment. If this story gripped you, make sure to subscribe to Britain's Dark Files and share this video to honor Victoria Hall's memory. Remember, behind every cold case is a story waiting to be told, and sometimes justice comes even when hope seems lost. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey. Stay with us for more of Britain's darkest files and keep the memories of the victims alive.